The room held its breath. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, not even the creak of a chair dared break the air. CSPAN's camera feed, normally monotonous and procedural, had suddenly transformed into the nation's most suspenseful close-up, trained tightly on Donald Trump's face. Every twitch of his mouth, every flicker in his pupils was now national currency. For 17 full seconds, he didn't blink. Jasmine Crockett didn't smile. She didn't shift in her seat. She simply let the silence stretch, the weight of her last words hanging over the chamber like a suspended gavel. Jeffrey Epstein. The name had dropped like a trapdoor. There was no gasp, no uproar, only silence. Louder than anything she could have said. Trump sat rigid. The former president's usual theatrics, the scoffs, the eye rolls, the muttered interruptions, were gone. In their place was something colder, something stiller. His jaw was locked, and his eyes had fixed on a point just past Jasmine's shoulder, as if staring through her would save him from what was coming next. Behind him, aides sat frozen. One, a young staffer, instinctively reached for a folder but hesitated. Another leaned in to whisper something and stopped halfway, as though the moment itself refused to be disturbed. Jasmine leaned forward ever so slightly and adjusted the microphone with the casual confidence of someone holding a loaded weapon and knowing precisely when to fire. "And Mr. Trump," she continued softly, "you knew him better than you want this nation to remember." Still no response. Just that stare, that tightening jaw. Then, a flicker, barely perceptible, passed over Trump's face. Not fear, not yet, but recognition, the kind that carries history in it. The kind that only happens when a wall you've spent decades building suddenly shows its first visible crack. Jasmine placed a thick, worn folder onto the table in front of her. The sound was subtle, but deliberate, the kind of punctuation that doesn't come from a gavel, but from evidence. "These are public flight logs," she said, voice low, steady. "They show you weren't just a name in a book. You were on that plane," repeatedly. Her hand rested gently on the folder like it was sacred text. The room remained frozen. The judge, an elderly man with decades of experience and a reputation for restraint, leaned forward ever so slightly. Even he, who'd seen hearings turn into chaos before, seemed transfixed. A camera operator behind the press box muttered, "He hasn't moved," and everyone noticed. 17 seconds. That's how long it took to shake the myth. That's how long Trump's silence screamed louder than any of his words ever had. When he finally blinked, the country was already watching in slow motion. Newsrooms would clip the moment and loop it endlessly. Analysts would pass every millisecond. The tension in his shoulders, the set of his jaw, the half-swallowed breath between syllables. But here, in the courtroom, Jasmine Crockett didn't need to say another word. The silence had already done its job. Trump's attorney finally stood, his voice brittle. "Objection, Your Honor. This is political theater. It has no bearing." The judge raised a hand, not even looking at him. "Congresswoman Crockett is submitting documents already, made part of public record. Your objection is noted." Overruled. Trump's eyes darted, just for a moment, toward the door. No exit, no red button, no ready button. No rally crowd to drown out the silence. Just Jasmine, sitting calmly, watching. She didn't need to win the moment. The moment had already happened. He just didn't know how much he'd already lost. The hush didn't break, it evolved. What had once been stunned silence turned into an edge-of-sea tension. Journalists scribbled in shorthand, their pens stuttering against the weight of the moment. Even seasoned legal observers who had seen political theater dressed as justice before knew this was different. Jasmine didn't lean into the theatrics. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She let the documents speak. The first recorded flight, she began, flipping the folder open, was November 22, 1994, Palm Beach to Newark. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Donald J. Trump. She lifted the page, a scan of the original flight log, Epstein's looping, distinct signature at the top, and held it steady. "These logs," Jasmine continued, "are not speculation. They're not media spin. They're evidence, collected by federal prosecutors, verified in multiple lawsuits, and buried over and over again, until survivors dragged them back into the light." Trump shifted in his seat, the leather creaking. Beneath him, a minor sound, but after that 17-second stare, even the creak of a chair sounded like a confession. Jasmine turned to the judge. "Your Honor, these documents were submitted as part of the Jeffrey v. Maxwell civil suit in 2015, redacted, unsealed, then submitted again in 2019 after Maxwell's arrest. They include over 700 pages of flight logs from 1993 to 2005. The judge gave a single nod. Behind Trump, His attorney leaned in and whispered something sharp. Trump waved it off. Jasmine continued, flipping to the next page. July 27, 1997, Teterboro to St. Thomas. Again, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Donald Trump. Her voice didn't rise. She wasn't preaching, she was prosecuting with precision. And not just flights. There are photos, dated, time-stamped. There are witness statements, sealed and unsealed, placing Mr. Trump at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse, at his island, at dinners where young girls were described as being part of the evening's entertainment. Trump's lawyer stood, "Your Honor, again, this is character assassination, not legal fact. There's no direct accusation." Jasmine didn't even turn to him. "There doesn't need to be an accusation," she said, flipping another page. "There's a pattern, a relationship, and a trail." She held up a photo, a grainy black and white press image from 2000. Trump and Epstein, shoulder to shoulder, laughing. Behind them, a young girl barely out of her teens, Epstein's hand on her waist. "This photo," she said, "has been seen before. What hasn't been shown is the document that goes with it, the guest list for that night." The young woman's name was Tiffany, last name withheld under seal. She was 15. A gasped on, not loud, but audible from the gallery. The judge raised his hand for order, but Jasmine was already moving on, not with rage, with resolve. These girls didn't have PR firms, they didn't have lawyers, they didn't have billion-dollar platforms, but what they did have was truth and court records, which this team, she gestured toward Trump's lawyers, has spent years trying to dismiss, delay, and discredit. Trump shifted again, now visibly agitated. Cameras caught the twitch in his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes. "This isn't hearsay," Jasmine said, turning back to the bench. "This is documentation, corroborated by third parties, submitted, under penalty of perjury." She placed one last paper on the table, a list of redacted settlement amounts from the Epstein estate. Dozens of entries, millions of dollars. "These women weren't all lying," she said. "They were bought." Trump opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, perhaps to dismiss her with a trademark jab, but Jasmine held up a single finger. "Not yet," she said, barely above a whisper. And somehow, that was louder than anything else. The courtroom didn't just feel heavy now, it felt haunted. Not by ghosts, not by facts, not by names no one wanted repeated, by flights everyone pretended not to remember, and by a truth that could no longer be erased. The folder lay open on Jasmine's desk, its pages fanned out like a paper-thin time machine. But this time, she didn't reach for another document. She didn't need to. What came next wasn't hidden in court records or sealed depositions. It was hiding in plain sight. A name, a place, a timeline everyone had tiptoed around for years. "Let's talk about Mar-a-Lago," she said softly. Trump sat forward, just slightly, a defensive instinct. He knew what was coming. "I'm not talking about fundraisers," Jasmine continued. "I'm not talking about golf tournaments. I'm talking about a girl named Virginia. Virginia Roberts." She looked up, not at Trump, but at the judge. The entire room felt colder now. She was 16, working at Mar-a-Lago, hired to hand out towels at the spa, until Ghislaine Maxwell approached her. A few heads turned in the gallery. Reporters began flipping through their notes. They'd all heard the story, but not like this. Not here, not under oath. She wasn't scouted at a nightclub. She wasn't trafficked in some far-off place. She was recruited on the property of a former US president. Jasmine walked to the screen beside her desk. With a remote, she tapped through images. The aerial shot of Mar-a-Lago's spa entrance. A grainy ID badge. Virginia G. Staff. And then, a 2015 deposition. "Ghislaine told me I was pretty. She asked if I'd ever considered modeling. She said I could make money. Real money. Giving massages to powerful men." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The horror was in the calm of it, in the predictability of how it unfolded. Jasmine turned back to the judge. "That's sworn testimony, Your Honor. Submitted in Jufre v. Maxwell. Exhibit 14. Trump's team was on edge now, whispering frantically between themselves. Trump's knuckles were white against the wood of the table. Jasmine's voice sharpened, not louder, but tighter, like a scalpel. "The question isn't whether you knew Epstein. That's not up for debate. The question is how many times you looked away, how many times you shook his hand, while standing on your own property, knowing girls were being scouted by the woman beside him." Trump's head jerked to the side. "I never met her." "That's a lie." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "No one said you met Virginia, but you met Ghislaine multiple times. There are photos." She clicked again. There it was, a 2000 gala, Palm Beach, Trump, Melania, Ghislaine Maxwell, smiling over her wine glass in the background. You called her very fine company. That's a quote. Trump scoffed. Everybody knew her. Exactly, Jasmine replied, folding her arms. Everybody knew. The words landed like a hammer, not just on Trump, but on every institution that had stood by and done nothing. She moved back to the folder, pulling out one more sheet, a Mar-a-Lago employee ledger from the late 90s, highlighted Virginia Roberts' massage department assistant. Her name, on paper, archived real. You owned the property. She worked for you. She was recruited there, and somehow no one knew anything. Trump leaned back now, arms crossed. His silence, this time, felt intentional, not stunned like before, but calculating, like a man choosing which wall to build next. Jasmine stared at him, unblinking. You don't have to answer, she said, because every survivor watching already knows. And just like that, the connection wasn't theoretical anymore. It wasn't distant or vague, that it was local. It was branded. It was branded. It was Trump's house. The air changed before the door even opened. It was something unspoken, an awareness, a tension that pulsed through the room like a slow-building tremor. Even the gallery, which had maintained its murmur of shifting feet and scribbling pens, fell completely still. Jasmine didn't say a word. She simply glanced at the door. A court officer stepped forward. Your Honor, he said quietly, the protected witness has arrived. The judge nodded. Let the record reflect that an anonymous witness, previously approved under protective status, will now testify under conditions granted by the court. Trump's lawyer stood in protest immediately. Your Honor, we object. This is a political stunt. An anonymous witness. Without cross-examination, the judge remained composed. Your team was informed. The witness will give a limited sworn statement. Congresswoman Crockett may read her deposition. You may respond after. Objection is overruled. The doors opened. A young woman stepped in, flanked by two federal marshals. Her face was partially obscured by a soft court-approved veil, not dramatic, just enough to give her anonymity without spectacle. She walked with a stiffness that spoke not of fear, but of memory, of weight. Her name was sealed in records as a hymn. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't need to. She sat. Jasmine approached gently, not as a prosecutor, but as a woman who understood the cost of being seen. Thank you for coming, Jasmine said quietly. She turned to the bench. With the court's permission, I'll read the sworn excerpt. The judge nodded. Jasmine opened the document, her voice even not theatrical, but reverent. I was 14 the first time I was flown to Epstein's island. I was told I'd be modeling, but when I arrived, I was told the rules were different. No phones, no contact with the outside world, and no saying no. A few in the gallery shifted. Someone whispered a stunned Jesus. There were other girls, some older, some younger, some there willingly. At first, most of us realized quickly we weren't going home anytime soon. Jasmine paused. Trump was unmoving, staring forward with a fixed expression, the kind that looked confident at a glance but revealed nothing beneath. He blinked. Once, I saw him there. Jasmine read. Donald Trump. He came one afternoon. It was 1997. I remember because I was told we needed to be extra obedient. Didn't touch me. He didn't need to. He watched, he knew. And when Epstein told a joke about fresh talent, he laughed. Jasmine looked up. Trump's mouth twitched. His lawyer leaned over and whispered urgently, but Trump waved him off. Jasmine turned to the judge. This testimony was given under oath. The witness passed a polygraph administered by federal authorities. Her story has been corroborated with flight records and employee logs. The judge nodded, noted. Her presence is acknowledged. Her testimony will be archived. AM rose slowly. Before she turned to leave, she looked up, not at Trump, at the cameras, just for a moment. Then she was gone. No mic drop. No dramatic music. Just the echo of her steps across the polished floor. Trump leaned back. Arms crossed, face tight. She's lying, he muttered under his breath. Jasmine looked at him, her voice like frost. Then sue her. He didn't respond, because everyone in the room knew he wouldn't. Because deep down, in places he'd never admit aloud, he knew she hadn't, and neither did the thousands who were watching. The room was no longer a courtroom. It was a reckoning. Jasmine didn't return to her seat. She stood in the well of the courtroom, one hand resting gently on the folder of sealed testimonies, the other on the lectern. Her eyes scanned the room, not just the judge, or Trump, or his lawyers, but the press, the nation, the system that had been built to forget girls like AM. This isn't just about one man, she said slowly. Let's not pretend that the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein were carried out in a vacuum. She pulled a sheet from the folder and lifted it for the record. Exhibit 27B. a partial list of guests, contacts, and associates from Epstein's social calendar collected by investigative journalist Vicky Ward, corroborated by FBI seizure records from the Manhattan townhouse. The names weren't new, but they had never been uttered here under oath, on camera, in a courtroom not built to protect them. Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Ehud Barak, Bill Gates, and yes, Donald J. Trump. Trump let out a sharp breath through his nose, as if that final grouping had snapped something inside him. But Jasmine kept going. Everyone knew, everyone smiled, everyone looked the other way. This wasn't a network of victims, it was a network of power, and power protects itself. The judge leaned back, fingers pressed against his lips. His eyes didn't move from her. Jasmine took a step forward. You know what's more chilling than the flight logs, than the photos? The parties, the meetings, the public records that show over and over again how Epstein moved freely, not despite his crimes, but because of who he knew. She lifted another page. February 12, 2002, Mar-a-Lago charity. Gala, Epstein, Maxwell, Dershowitz, Trump, all seated at the same table for men, two of them facing active litigation tied to underage sexual abuse. She paused. Let the air thicken. Trump's counsel stood. Your Honor, we're venturing far beyond the scope. No, the judge interrupted, eyes still on Jasmine. Let her continue. Trump whipped his head toward the bench, incredulous. Jasmine's voice remained calm, unnervingly so. This court may not have the power to prosecute that web, but it has the power to reveal it. And that's the one thing men like Mr. Trump fear more than prison. Transparency. She walked back to her table and placed the pages down slowly. You see, it was never just about what happened on Epstein's island, or in his plane, or behind those mirrored doors in Manhattan. It was about who helped him stay untouchable. She didn't need to say the next part out loud, because everyone was already thinking it. The donors, the judges, the senators in the room. Some of them had known, too. Trump's voice cut through the quiet, hoarse and bitter. You're trying to burn the whole damn system down. Jasmine looked at him, unblinking. No, she said. I'm trying to show the country what the system protected. The court sat suspended, caught between outrage and revelation for the first time in years. It wasn't just Trump on trial, it was the entire edifice built around him, and it was starting to crack. Jasmine didn't return to her seat. She stood in the well of the courtroom, one hand resting gently on the folder of sealed testimonies, the other on the lectern. Her eyes scanned the room, not just the judge, or Trump, or his lawyers, but the press, the nation, the system that had been built to forget girls like AM. This isn't just about one man, she said slowly. Let's not pretend that the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein were carried out in a vacuum. She pulled a sheet from the folder and lifted it for the record. Exhibit 27B, a partial list of guests, contacts, and associates from Epstein's social calendar collected by investigative journalist Vicky Ward, corroborated by FBI seizure records from the Manhattan townhouse. The names weren't new, but they had never been uttered here under oath, on camera, in a courtroom not built to protect them. Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, Ehud Barak, Bill Gates, and yes, Donald J. Trump. Trump let out a sharp breath through his nose, as if that final grouping had snapped something inside him. But Jasmine kept going. Everyone knew, everyone smiled, everyone looked the other way. This wasn't a network of victims, it was a network of power, and power protects itself. The judge leaned back, fingers pressed against his lips. His eyes didn't move from her. Jasmine took a step forward. You know what's more chilling than the flight logs, than the photos? The parties, the meetings, the public records that show over and over again how Epstein moved freely, not despite his crimes, but because of who he knew. She lifted another page. February 12, 2002, Mar-a-Lago charity. Gala, Epstein, Maxwell, Dershowitz, Trump, all seated at the same table for men, two of them facing active litigation tied to underage sexual abuse. She paused. Let the air thicken. Trump's counsel stood. Your Honor, we're venturing far beyond the scope. No, the judge interrupted, eyes still on Jasmine. Let her continue. Trump whipped his head toward the bench, incredulous. Jasmine's voice remained calm, unnervingly so. This court may not have the power to prosecute that web, but it has the power to reveal it. And that's the one thing men like Mr. Trump fear more than prison: transparency. She walked back to her table and placed the pages down slowly. You see, it was never just about what happened on Epstein's island, or in his plane, or behind those mirrored doors in Manhattan. It was about who helped him stay untouchable. She didn't need to say the next part out loud, because everyone was already thinking it. The donors. The judges. The senators in the room. Some of them had known. To Trump's voice cut through the quiet, hoarse and bitter. You're trying to burn the whole damn system down. Jasmine looked at him, unblinking. No, she said. I'm trying to show the country what the system protected. The court sat suspended, caught between outrage and revelation. For the first time in years, it wasn't just Trump on trial, it was the entire edifice built around him, and it was starting to crack. The room seemed to tilt slightly as Trump stood, not rushed, not panicked, but with the slow, calculating posture of a man who still believed the weight of his name could shift gravity. He tugged at the cuffs of his navy blazer, then stepped toward the microphone, ignoring the quiet objections of his counsel. They knew better. He didn't take advice. Not from lawyers. Not from aides. Not from God. The judge raised an eyebrow, silently granting him the floor. Jasmine returned to her seat, eyes fixed, not blinking on the man who had so often dominated the headlines, but never this kind of silence. Trump cleared his throat. The courtroom was so still. The mic caught the faint rasp of age and ego wrestling behind his voice. I've been patient, he began, voice low but laced with heat. I've listened to the slander, the innuendo, the fantasy. He turned, slightly, facing the press bench, and I've watched as this courtroom became a theater of lies. He glanced at Jasmine, starring her. Jasmine didn't flinch. Trump continued, voice rising. This circus. This isn't justice. This is vengeance. This is an ambush of character meant to paint a man as a monster, because that's the only way these people can feel moral. Again, a few murmurs from the gallery. He fed off it. You think you're brave, standing there reading old logs and gossip columns. You think you know who I am. He leaned forward, jaw tight. I knew Epstein like 1,000 other people. Didn't I cut ties when it became clear who he was? Unlike some of your precious heroes. Unlike Clinton. Unlike Prince Andrew. But no one ever talks about them, do they? A pause. A carefully placed victim card. That's the thing with the left, he growled. You pretend to protect women, while you silence truth. You talk about justice while you sell headlines, and you talk about victims, while destroying anyone who doesn't kneel to your version of it. He turned to the judge now. So, let's be clear. I am not on trial for a crime. I'm on trial for not apologizing for who I am. He pointed directly at Jasmine. And you, Congresswoman Crockett, you don't want justice. You want revenge wrapped in applause. A hush fell thick and uneven. Then Jasmine rose quietly, slowly, like the air was shifting around her. You said you cut ties, she said softly, walking forward. But you didn't call the authorities. You didn't testify. You didn't protect anyone. You cut ties like a man burns papers, not because he's innocent, but because he's next. Trump's lips twitched. You can twist that any way you like, he muttered. But Jasmine kept going. You stood beside Epstein for years. You joked about girls on camera. You hired him, you invited him, and you protected him, right? Up until the day he became inconvenient. Trump leaned forward. You don't have proof. Exactly, she interrupted, because men like you never leave fingerprints, just patterns. She turned to the room, addressing them all now. This is what they do. They don't deny, they distract, they deflect, they scream about conspiracies and claim victimhood, till the story becomes so tangled, no one remembers the beginning. Then back to Trump. You say you're not on trial for a crime, but maybe you should be. And with that, she sat. The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was angry, raw. It felt like the beginning of something no one could undo, and Trump, for the first time, looked like he wasn't sure if talking had helped, or revealed too much. A ripple passed through the room as Jasmine placed a worn manila folder on the table. No label, no markings, just a faint crease down the center like it had been opened and shut too many times, always with hesitation. She didn't touch it immediately, letting it sit there, pulsing with tension like a heartbeat. Then finally, she looked to the judge. Your Honor, she said quietly, with the court's permission, I'd like to submit a personal letter. It was sealed, originally sent to the Manhattan DA's office. The author passed 6 months ago. It's never been read aloud until now. Judge Mendoza studied her carefully. Is it relevant? It's more than relevant, Jasmine replied. It's a voice that was buried before she could testify. It's from AM. The initials hit the room like a slap. A.M. The initials that had haunted tabloid speculation for years. The initials from the redacted flight logs. The initials that had appeared beside Epstein's name in a blurred image filed in the Southern District Archives. Now they had a voice, and Jasmine was about to unseal it. The judge gave a slow nod. Proceed. Jasmine opened the folder with careful fingers. Inside, a single page creased, handwritten, ink faded in spots where it had clearly been wept over. She took a breath, then read, "To whoever still cares to listen, my name will be forgotten. I know that. That's the cost of silence. But my story still lives in rooms like this, hushed, half-believed, dismissed by men who shake hands while closing doors. I met him when I was 16. I didn't know who he was, not really. But I knew he had power. And that power followed me into rooms I wasn't ready for. It was always him and J.E. together. They treated girls like tokens, like collectibles, like property. He called me his American Rose. I was flown to Palm Beach, to Manhattan, once to a ranch I couldn't find on a map now if I tried. And every time I cried, they said I was ruining the mood. There were NDAs, gifts, payments, but the silence, God, the silence was the worst. I saw the photos, I saw the tapes. He told me they were insurance, and when I tried to leave, he laughed and said, "You think anyone would believe a little nothing like you over me? Maybe they won't, but maybe someone will." Cindy M. The room was silent, not the silence of formality, but the silence of sickness, of truth landing like a knife. Jasmine folded the letter across the room. Trump's face had stiffened, not rage, not fear, something worse, recognition. He didn't speak, neither did his lawyers. They didn't need to, the crowd murmured. Journalists were already texting their editors. In the back, a woman clutched her chest. Somewhere near the front, someone started crying softly, almost inaudibly, and Jasmine, she just looked at Trump, not with anger, with mourning. "You called her a nothing," she said quietly, "but now the world knows her voice, and it cuts through every dollar you ever used to bury it." The judge slowly adjusted his glasses. The letter will be entered into evidence, but it already had been seared into the memory of everyone in that room. Outside, a storm was beginning to form. Inside, justice had just taken its first breath. It began not with shouting, but with the flick of a single phone screen. A teenager, in the back row, maybe a law student, maybe just lucky to get a seat, had streamed Jasmine's reading of the letter to their followers. Live raw, unfiltered. Within minutes, the clip exploded, and inside the courtroom the fallout began to detonate. One woman stood, then another, then a third, all with tears glinting in their eyes. Not from spectacle, but recognition. "I was her," someone whispered. Gasps rippled through the gallery like waves breaking against a seawall. Judge Mendoza slammed his gavel, but even the gavel sounded distant now, muffled beneath the rising pulse of outrage and grief and something else, collective memory. Jasmine turned, stunned not by the noise but by its direction. The gallery wasn't out of control. They were awakening. One voice broke the barrier. "You knew Donald." Another, "You silenced her." Trump rose abruptly, fists clenched. "You people believe fiction now," he spat. "This is a circus." But nobody flinched. The silence that had once followed his outbursts, the silence of fear, had shattered, and something stronger had taken its place. Across the aisle, a veteran journalist from the New York Times was typing frantically on a laptop. On the other side, a TikTok influencer mouthed "AM" into her camera, eyes wide. By now, the live clip had crossed 1 million views, then 2, then 5. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered around a jumbotron, one of the protests organizers had wielded in days ago for press attention. Now it was broadcasting Jasmine's voice from the courtroom, word for word. "You called her a nothing, but now the world knows her voice." People froze in place, tears streaming, phones raised in solemn unison like candlelight at a vigil. Back inside, the courtroom swelled with a rising chorus of murmurs. A security officer whispered into his earpiece, "We've got a situation out front. Hundreds, they're chanting her name." Judge Mendoza stood, visibly shaken. Order in the court, but order was no longer his to command. Truth had gone viral. Jasmine's eyes met Trump's. "You controlled the media," she said, her voice measured, firm. "You controlled the narrative. But you forgot the one thing you can't buy." She gestured to the gallery. The people outside, the chant now echoed through the marble halls of justice. "AM, AM, AM." Woman near the bench pulled out a hand-painted sign that read, "I was her, and I'm still here." Judge Mendoza looked down from the bench, not angry now, but humbled. The room wasn't spinning out of control. It was reclaiming itself. Trump had held the line for hours, arms crossed, jaw tight, lips curled into that familiar scowl that once terrified networks and reshaped elections. But this was different. This wasn't a debate stage or a rally. It wasn't a room filled with sycophants or strategists. This was a courtroom of consequence, and worse, a room turning against him. The chant from outside bled through the walls, haunting and rhythmic. AMA. Trump twitched. His hands, once so firm on the desk, now clenched and unclenched in agitated bursts. Sweat beaded along his hairline. Jasmine hadn't even spoken. Not in 10 full minutes. She simply watched, and that he couldn't take. He slammed both hands on the table. Enough of this. The chamber froze. All eyes turned. You're all in on this, he snarled, pointing wildly, first at Jasmine, then at the judge, then at the gallery. You, the media, the Democrats, the deep state. This is a setup. Judge Mendoza stiffened, but said nothing. Trump continued, voice rising. You're not interested in justice. You want humiliation. You want me, crucified on the altar of your political correctness. Jasmine finally spoke, quiet, but precise. No, Donald, we want accountability, and you've never known the difference. He rounded on her eyes. Bloodshot. You think reading one sob story makes you a hero, that it wipes away all your race baiting, your screaming, your made-for-Twitter gotchas. Jasmine stood. It's not one story, it's a ledger. She stepped closer, the gallery holding its collective breath. Every woman you dismissed, every immigrant you mocked, every child you locked in a cage, every black mother who buried a son while you posted memes, all of it, that's what this courtroom is. Trump's voice cracked. Lies. It's your legacy. He turned to Judge Mendoza, desperate. You're gonna let her talk to me like that? Are you not the judge here? Mendoza didn't answer immediately. He glanced around the room, not as a man grasping for control, but one listening for something deeper. And in that silence, Trump snapped. You're not a judge, you're a puppet. I made you. I endorsed you in 2016, and this is how you repay me. The courtroom gasped. Mendoza narrowed his eyes. That's quite enough, Mr. Trump. But it wasn't. Not for him. He spun toward the cameras, red-faced finger jabbing toward nowhere. This is a witch hunt. You want blood? Fine, make me the villain. You always needed one. And then he broke. His voice cracked into something, high-pitched, nearly childlike. Why won't any of you defend me? No answer. Melania, absent, his lawyers, silent. His base, behind glass and screens, could not save him here. He sagged back into his chair, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Jasmine sat slowly. You've always played the victim, Donald, she said. Not with malice, but exhaustion. But the difference is, the real victims don't get golden elevators and secret settlements. The gavel fell, once, twice. Court will reassess for 30 minutes, Mendoza said, his voice low. Trump didn't move. His empire, once built on bombast, had finally met the one thing it couldn't bulldoze, a room that had stopped listening. The courtroom had emptied slowly, not with the chaos of scandal, but the stillness of history settling into place. But the cameras never blinked. Outside, crowds surged, not with rage, not with celebration, with a silence that meant something had changed, even if no one could yet say how. Inside, Jasmine remained seated, alone now, papers tucked beneath one arm, her phone face down. Her fingers, for once, weren't clenched around a microphone or flicking through notes. They rested gently in her lap. She looked. Still aid voices murmured outside the chamber. Doors. Journalists scrambled. Newsrooms refreshed feeds across the country. And then a beep. A single notification lit up the control monitor near the back wall. Live. Jasmine Crockett's final statement. Full CLIP. The upload had started 10 minutes earlier. It was already at 2 million views. By the time the judge returned, it would pass 10. The screen played quietly, just loud enough for those lingering to hear. Jasmine's voice echoed through the feed. Some men believe power is their birthright. That legacy